NHS would be treating less people for carbon dioxide related problems if more people travelled by zero-emission motor vehicles or utilised our railway networks more often to make journeys. By adopting new greener technologies, both the road and rail sectors could play an important part in keeping both the nation and the environment healthy. In this programme, we look at how the road and rail sectors can play their parts to reduce the nation's carbon footprint. Sir Neil McKay, lead NHS Director for Sustainability, tells us why the NHS will have to play a leading role in tackling climate change if it's to provide quality healthcare. We also hear from Jonathan Porritt from Forum for the Future, who says the NHS is a huge organisation with a huge carbon footprint, and unless we can find very clear ways of reducing that footprint as fast as possible, there are no serious prospects for a low-carbon Britain. We hear the views of Lord Adonis, Secretary of State for Transport, and Lord Paul Drayson, the Science and Innovation Minister, who was speaking at the launch of a £25 million project to road test 8 prototypes of electric cars throughout the UK. We hear the views of Renault UK, who are launching their much-lauded zero-emission cars. Renault's new electric vehicles are efficient, user-friendly, zero-emission cars, with the focus on minimising energy consumption while at the same time providing core comfort features. Michael Roberts, Chief Executive of ATOC, the Association of Train Operating Companies, tells us why travel by rail is the way ahead for personal health and a healthier environment. Heidi Mottram, Managing Director of Northern Rail, explains why we should all be embracing rail as a sustainable form of transport. Finally, we also hear the views of Richard Cuthbert, Group CEO of Mutual Management Consulting, who work with government agencies, local authorities, government-regulated industries and the private sector to provide safe, reliable roads, railways and cost-effective energy. A new report called Fit for the Future looks at the role the NHS should play in tackling climate change and is produced jointly by the environmental group Forum for the Future and the NHS Sustainable Development Unit. It's the first time the NHS has studied the long-term measures required to maintain a quality health service in the UK in the face of climate change.
We're launching a document today called Fit for the Future, which sets out a series of scenarios to help people plan for a sustainable future for the National Health Service against a backcloth of increasing pressures to reduce carbon emissions.
The document says the NHS emits 18 million tonnes of CO2 each year, the largest carbon footprint of any public service provider in Europe, and high carbon prices will squeeze its budgets unless it changes its practices. The aim is for the NHS to transform itself into an efficient, low-carbon operation in order to provide the best quality healthcare.
Not many people have heard of the idea of low-carbon health services. It doesn't resonate in the public mind as yet, but it pretty soon will, because as the UK sets out to achieve these very ambitious reductions in CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions, we have got to make a priority of the health service and reducing greenhouse gas emissions directly and indirectly caused by the health service in the UK.
The report also states that the NHS has a key leadership role to play in creating a more sustainable society in the UK. Its massive size and reach mean that it can have a great influence on British society as it transforms itself into a low-carbon service.
Our people have worked on a number of schemes for hospitals, creating travel plans and trying to improve the whole travel environment around hospitals, but also the sustainability of the travel activity. So this could be introducing park and ride schemes, it could be to change the parking facilities, it could be to enhance cycling facilities at sites, but also to work with local authorities, with surrounding residential neighbourhoods, with public transport operators to improve the travel options for people trying to get to and from hospitals.
The NHS is a huge organisation, and you won't be surprised to hear that it has a huge carbon footprint. And unless we can find very clear ways of reducing that footprint as fast as possible, there are no serious prospects for a low-carbon Britain. It's as simple as that. If you want to talk about low-carbon Britain, you have to talk about a low-carbon NHS. So this is the reality for all health managers now, for anyone working in any part of the health system, for those organisations that partner with health organisations, primary care trusts and so on. This is the reality. We have to work together to achieve these reductions.
There are a variety of measures that we include in here. I mean, these aren't just measures about the National Health Service. They offer societal, political, environmental scenarios, the like of which we can't predict with any degree of accuracy in 20 years' time. And they say to people, within these scenarios, how will you plan for providing sustainable national health services? It's very interesting when we look at the moment and how we can improve quality and improve productivity. Measures in my region, for example, 60% of them are consistent with a low carbon national health service. So, for example, providing care for people nearer to their homes so people don't have to travel so far. For example, thinking critically about drug prescribing costs and the use of pharmaceuticals, thinking critically about health and well-being through exercise, through strategies to reduce obesity, respiratory illnesses and so forth. These are all part and parcel of the actions which NHS bodies need to be thinking about as part of the future.
The report provides 5 key steps to creating a sustainable low-carbon healthcare system, which is prepared for whatever the future may hold. Its authors believe the NHS is uniquely positioned to play a leading role in shaping a more sustainable future for the UK.
I think the issue is that a lot of people think, well, this is somebody else's problem, but actually it's everybody's problem. And so it's no good senior figures in a hospital and the administrators and the consultants saying, okay, let's do this, but actually let's expect everybody else to do it. It's about them actually showing that they really believe in this and they're willing to put their money where their mouth is and do and change their own behaviour. So getting in the car is not necessarily an option for some of these people. They've got to find a better way, and obviously sometimes that means they've got to improve public transport services. Park and ride is quite a popular solution for congested sites, and we know that for everybody, walking and cycling is not an option, but maybe it's time for more people to start thinking about that.
The government has given the go-ahead for £25 million of funding for 8 prototypes of electric cars to be road tested throughout the UK. It's the largest project of its kind and was launched by the government's Science and Innovation Ministers. It aimed to have over 300 low-carbon cars on British roads in 18 months and to build a database of information on such vehicles.
There's been a lot of talk about the need to change personal transport to lower carbon vehicles over time. We have binding legal requirements by 2050. It takes time to get there, so the technologies have been developed in the laboratories and workshops. This is a demonstrator program to put them all together. You find out when you make a car whether it works, how people use it, where you charge it, those sorts of things. So it's to prove the technology and also to find out what we haven't done yet, because we can feed that back into the next stage of our programs.
The new ultra-low carbon vehicles have been designed and built by some of the world's biggest car manufacturers. The aim of the trial is to put almost 350 cars in different locations and work out what needs to be put in place to make using them on a mass scale a reality.
It's really an evaluation of what technology is available at the time, so we have to go into different places. So we've got cars in Scotland, in the northeast, in the Midlands and around London and the southeast. All of them different environments, all of them different requirements, different drivers, different geographies, everything's different.
The initiative was launched in London by the Ministers for Science and Innovation and Transport. They see both the transport and data from the trial as crucial in cementing Britain's future role in ultra-low carbon vehicle development.
We're now in the process of making electric vehicles a reality, and for them to be a reality, people have got to have demonstration projects to be able to drive, and we've got to learn from those demonstration projects when it comes to designing mass market vehicles. We now have demonstration projects available. 340 of them will be located in 8 locations over the coming months. The public will get the opportunity to drive them, and I hope it's only a matter of a short number of months before we see big developments in the commercialisation of ultra-low carbon and electric vehicles, and I hope only a few years before a mass market model is available.
It's vital because this is the world's largest ever trial. Consumers actually using electric vehicles. We need to get the data to see how people's driving habits change and then feed that information back into the next generation of technology to make the UK the best place to do this type of R&D, the manufacture of next generation vehicles in the future.
One of Britain's leading motoring correspondents also gave the scheme his backing.
We've got car companies, we've got energy suppliers, we've got universities all coming together to put these projects across the country so the consumer finally will have access to electric cars. And don't worry about whether the climate change argument works or not for you. Just think that oil has gone up 60% since December. Not through demand, but by just oil traders and speculators. We can't have that, it's unsustainable. We've got to find energy security, and this is the beginning of the beginning.
With growing pressure to move to more environmentally friendly transport, 340 electric vehicles will be trialled over the next 18 months. The information from this will put the UK in pole position in research and development and manufacturing of the next generation of electric and ultra-low carbon vehicles.
Most people are familiar with the Renault brand, and we are a global car brand, although we're probably most successful in Europe. But through our alliance with Nissan, we are truly a global player as a Renault-Nissan alliance, and it's this alliance who have a stated ambition by 2020 to become the leader in electric vehicles throughout the world. So we see ourselves as a global player with a very clear aspiration in terms of the electric vehicle. For a number of years now, manufacturers have been working to reduce the pollution from their engines, and we now regularly see clean diesel engines that are emitting less than 100 grams of CO2. Going forward, there'll be hybrid engines and even plug-in hybrids which will see that reduce further to 70-75 grams of CO2. But within Renault, within the alliance, we see electric vehicles which are zero emission as a step change. And even accepting the fact that there is pollution associated with the generation of electricity, it still means that we are making a very significant reduction in pollution, both in terms of carbon dioxide and other particulates in the atmosphere. That's got to be a good thing. And from a health point of view, we recognise is that there is a health cost associated with transportation and with pollution, and therefore if we can improve that situation, we can reduce lung disease, we can reduce respiratory issues, and for that reason we see electric vehicles and the wide-scale adoption of electric vehicles as a very positive step in terms of improving health. Renault, I think, have made a clear statement in launching a range of 4 vehicles, 5 including a van, all electric vehicles. We see it as much more than just a statement. We see it as the future in terms of our product development. We see it as offering an opportunity for people to enjoy mass market electric vehicles that are affordable, and by doing that, bringing these cars out over the next 10 years, what we will see is a very significant impact in terms of reducing carbon dioxide emissions and therefore improving people's health. Between 2011 and 2012 we'll be launching 4 new cars. In mid-2011 there'll be a Kangoo car, very similar to the vehicle behind me, family car derived from the Kangoo. The second car we will launch will be Fluence, which is a 5-seat mid-range family saloon suitable for most people. Towards the end of the year, a 2-seat urban city car called the Twizy, and then the final piece of the jigsaw will be in mid-2012, where we'll launch an all-new small car segment car, so the equivalent of our Clio in our current range, which is called Zoe, and that is designed as an all-electric vehicle. It simply won't be available in a petrol or a diesel. So there's a range, comprehensive range, covering most people's motoring requirements, all launched within the space of 12 months. We see the key to this as making these vehicles affordable. So firstly, in terms of outright purchase, we will initially rely on the government grants that will be available to make sure that the cost of the electric vehicle is the same as the equivalent petrol or diesel. So affordability is a key. We see benefits for the customer in terms of reduced running costs, reduced maintenance, reduced time off the road. So Renault recognise that by giving people a choice in terms of electric vehicles, and by selling significant volumes as an alternative to petrol or diesel, there can be a very, very big change in terms of the level of pollution, and with that comes obvious health benefits, and that has to be a good thing for everyone. We believe that what we will be delivering is a range of electric vehicles which will be suitable for most people's requirements. They will be affordable. They'll be cheap to run because of the cost of electricity. They'll be easy to maintain because there's less to go wrong with them. And critically, by making that choice, you will actually be having a very significant impact in terms of reducing the level of CO2. And that has to be good not only for the environment, but more immediately in terms of people's health. So we're making it possible for people to take up electric vehicles. I would urge people to consider them very seriously as a viable alternative and a credible alternative to petrol or diesel, and to look at it from the point of view of health and environment.
The Association of Train Operating Companies is the body that represents passenger railway operators to government and to the media and the public. We also provide some really important services to the industry. Environmental issues, particularly climate change, which is probably the most important issue we face on the environment, is an issue for rail as it is for all of us. We all have our bit to do, whether at work, on the move, at home, in the shops. And rail takes seriously what it can contribute to tackling emissions of carbon dioxide, because we think we've got advantages over other forms of transport. On average, for example, rail emits just half the emissions that cars produce, and just a quarter of the CO2 emissions from aviation. So we think that travelling by rail, whether that's commuting or for business, is part of a greener lifestyle.
Northern Rail is the largest train operating company in the UK, and we connect all the major cities of the north: Liverpool, Manchester, Sheffield, Newcastle, Leeds, and all the other towns and cities right the way across the north of England. We see ourselves very much as part of, if you like, the fabric of the north, and essential to getting people to and from work, to and from play, to and from business in the most cost-effective and efficient way. And when we started operating the franchise about 4 years ago, clearly the most important thing any rail operator can do is to run their trains on time, because that's the offer that we make to the customer. And we've made fantastic progress in terms of punctuality and reliability, and our trains are now operating 95% on time, and people can therefore very much make lifestyle choices relying on us to take them from A to B. The customer experience clearly has to be good. We need to be welcoming, we need to be friendly, we need to be accessible. We've invested in information systems, in our stations, in our trains, to make it overall a much more attractive product. And of course, rail travel is really great value for money as well. The average fare on Northern is around about £2.20, which by any means is great value for money. And if you want to invest in such things as season tickets, then it can become even more a great value product. And so I think there's an awful lot going for it in terms of people wanting to come to public transport. The environment is important to everybody, isn't it? And how we protect our planet, how we interact with our planet, I think is increasingly dear to everybody's hearts. And in Northern, we believe that rail travel already has very good green credentials. Clearly, if we're carrying significant numbers of people when otherwise they might be in cars on their own, and given the kind of emissions that we know cars can make, then we start off, I think, from quite a good base. But we didn't want to be complacent about that, and the first thing we needed to do was to understand our own environmental impact, and we were the first train operating company to fully measure its carbon footprint in a very systematic way, not just the emissions of the trains, but everything to do with our supplier chain and all the interactions with the wider world. And from that, we knew then that we could build a base, and we set ourselves a vision of being the train operator making the most contribution to the sustainability agenda. And we launched our environmental strategy, looking at different ways that we could make a difference. And one of the good examples of that would be that we clearly worked out very early on that we had a lot of enthusiasm within the company for people who wanted to think of different ways that they could make a difference. And we thought, great, let's harness that. So we have 70 volunteer environment champions within the business, and they're just looking at ways within their own working environment that they can do something different. And very simple things often, switching photocopiers from doing single-sided to double-sided, makes a huge difference in paper consumption, making sure that lights are turned off, heating's turned off. And probably the thing that we're proudest of, and it's the biggest impact, is that despite actually increasing the number of trains that we operate in the last year, we've actually cut our fuel consumption by about 13%. So that is a really good achievement just by taking care. Drivers looking at different techniques as being probably the most effective intervention on that. But we also are a big utility user in our depots where we do maintenance and on our stations. And we've actually been conducting an audit of every single one of our stations to see what we could do. And one of the initiatives that we're doing there is switching station lights onto light-sensitive meters. Typically, we set the timers at appropriate times of the year, and at this time of year, obviously, we're adjusting them for the clocks having just gone back. But of course, Mother Nature doesn't respect the times of the clocks. It can be lighter at certain times of the day and darker at certain times of the day. And we've worked out that if we can respond to actually the environmental conditions, we're likely to have the station lights on for considerably less than they're on now, and we think that will make a big difference. And also in the ticket offices as well themselves, the heating systems that we use and the lighting systems, we're moving towards movement sensitive lighting, so that if somebody isn't there, some of our ticket offices are not manned in the afternoons, then that's going to make a difference too. And we believe that overall that will really drive some big improvements for Northern. We're now carrying 34% more people than when we started, and it's a great value product, so we know that we're going to continue to attract more people. So one of our ambitions is to get additional vehicles to allow that expansion to continue and to allow us to take more and more people by rail in an environmentally sustainable way. So we're working with government at the moment to look at different ways that we could bring that capacity in, and also working with Network Rail, the infrastructure provider, to see how we can make sure that platforms are longer and we've got more depots so that we can continue to expand the railway moving forward and to keep that success story going.
Michelle is a consulting and business services company. We work almost exclusively in the UK. We employ about 11,000 staff across the whole of the country, and we work mainly with the public sector to transform public services and sustain vital infrastructure. Probably one of the most well-known projects that we've been involved in was the M42 motorway to the south and east of Birmingham, where you can now use the hard shoulder as a running lane in times of peak traffic. And that was an experiment that we led for the Highways Agency, which has successfully improved journey times, it's improved journey time reliability, it's improved safety, but it's also brought emissions down by about 10%. So it's a very successful scheme, and as a result it's now going to be rolled out on other motorways around the country. In terms of the work we do with the NHS and the various arms of the NHS, and particularly around hospitals, we have worked with hospitals in the northwest, also down in Cornwall and Bristol, and in other parts of the country too. And what we've tended to do there is to help hospitals devise and develop their own travel plans. And this is both for obviously visitors and patients, but crucially for people who go to the hospital every day and work there, and also freight and delivery traffic. And whilst some of our proposals might result in changed infrastructure, usually it's around how the traffic is managed, both when it's getting to the site, but actually what happens on the site. And there, most of the work that we do is also geared to influencing people's travel choices and influencing their behaviours. And that can be done best by improving the options that are open to them, whether they are a car driver or whether they might switch to public transport, or whether walking or cycling is an option for them. And in coming up with our recommendations, we're always conscious of the healthy lifestyles and the importance it is for people to adopt a more healthy approach to the way they travel around the country, and also the impact that that can have on the carbon footprint. Working with the NHS and individual hospitals and NHS trusts, I think we've we've seen that most organisations have embraced the thrust to adopt a travel plan, but actually you need to do more than that, clearly. You need a good plan, and I think certainly in the cases that Michelle's been involved in, we can certainly help develop good travel plans. But what you then need is somebody who has a passion for actually implementing that plan, who carries respect in the organisation and can influence people and really work with the stakeholders, the local residential areas and neighbourhoods, the public transport operators, and all of the big organisations that are embraced around the hospital, to coordinate them and really carry forward the plan. And then the third thing probably is that it needs leadership and ownership. And that means that the senior figures in a hospital organisation need to realise that their behaviours are important. They need to get behind the plan, and they need to do as they expect others to do. Because without that leadership, then it's too easy for people just to think it's somebody else's problem. Michelle is trying to lead by example in this area. We employ a lot of people around the country. We have more than 100 offices around the country, and we're perhaps fortunate that many of our staff are very aware about the environment. They're keen on sustainability, and so they may be a slightly better audience than you may get in a normal hospital. Having said that, they're all wedded to their own personal travel patterns. We have travel plans in place in most of our offices, and also in most cases we now have a travel plan coordinator to actually really drive that plan forward and encourage some of the more difficult things like car sharing, carpooling, changing of mode. We have already reduced our carbon footprint as an organisation as a result of that procedure by about 10%, and in the next 12 months we think we can aim for another 5 or 10% reduction and move from there. It's going to be a long journey, but we've started off pretty well.
In conclusion, it's clear that both road and rail still have a major role to play in any sustainable transport strategy. I'm Georgina Burnett, and you've been watching Going Green via Road and Rail.